We all agree that the climate is changing faster and faster. And Australia is at the forefront of climate change. I think we can say that last summer was a turning point, with severe drought, floods, and the terrible bushfires, resulting in loss of land, human life, and more than 1 billion animals killed. Last week, the UNEP made a call to action to the HVAC and air industry and governments around the world and released a report saying that energy efficient and climate-friendly cooling is key to keep climate change in check. Perfect timing for today's conference. Cooling is clearly everyone's problem. The good news is that the technologies and capabilities are available in Australia and New Zealand. Now, we have the opportunity to take a leadership role in making a cooler and more sustainable future. And we hope that by the end of the day, we will all agree. But that's enough from me. After the presentation, we will have the opportunity to take some questions. So please, submit your question in the Q&A box. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Jean Blackley, the leader of Project Drawdown in Australia. Jean is an advocate for regenerating a socially equitable and environmentally sustainable world. Welcome, Jean. Over to you.
A special thank you for giving me an excuse today to kind of dress up a little bit instead of the sort of new normal of wearing tracksuit pants and a hoodie every day to work. So, climate change. The majority of Australians and New Zealanders agree that climate change has arrived. The impacts are here and now, and they're only going to get worse. And on top of the climate crisis, we have a species extinction crisis, and we have a broader ecological crisis of how we're destroying our ecosystems that support us. We're depleting the nutrients in our topsoil that grows our food, and we're killing off life in our oceans. Now, these crises are feedback from our environment that what we're doing as human beings isn't working, that we need to change our ways. So it's a crisis, but it represents opportunity. And what I want to talk about today is that it's actually possibly the most unprecedented economic opportunity in human history. Because maybe climate change isn't something that's happening to us, but is rather something that's happening for us, to show us a better way, to show us that we can change our relationship with our natural ecosystems, that we can live more sustainably, and that there's an incredibly economically prosperous future in us doing so. So today I'm going to highlight particularly that it's an unprecedented economic opportunity for Australia. But before I get started, let me just lay out some credentials as sort of a closet environmentalist and someone who's had a long corporate career. I'm not here to talk about saving the planet. And I'm going to talk, and I want to explain why I don't like news articles that highlight the risk of losing polar bears by the end of this century. And also why I don't think it's valuable to talk about the fact that climate action is about saving our coral reefs. I think all of these are invalid. It's not where our focus should be, because climate change isn't about saving the planet. The planet's been here for at least 4.5 billion years. Unchecked runaway climate change If that occurred, the planet will be just fine. It will still be here for many more billions of years. There'll be plenty of thriving ecosystems, and a lot of species will survive and thrive better than ever before on a super hot planet. The real threat, the reason it's a myth that climate action is about saving the environment, is because the real threat is our threat to survival as a human race. It's not about saving the environment. Climate action is about saving human life as we now know it, being able to continue the thriving livelihoods that we enjoy as humans today for our next generation, our children, their children, and generations beyond them. And so I actually think it's unhelpful to have news articles like we saw last week about losing polar bears by 2100. Now, while I don't want to see the loss of polar bears and other species, while I don't want to see the loss of coral reefs, the fact is that some of these consequences are already baked in. Climate scientists have made it clear we're going to lose most of our coral reefs. But I don't think that that's what galvanises people into climate action. What we need to be talking about is that this is a threat to our way of life. And it doesn't have to be that way because it's an extraordinary opportunity. And many of leaders around our world, people across various sectors of our community, understand this. And that's why today we're seeing that millions of people worldwide from tens of thousands of organisations are getting on with climate action, putting solutions in place, bringing extraordinary innovations to our markets and for creating a better world. So our community is broadly on board. In Australia, 60% of Australians believe that we need to take more urgent climate action, even if it might cost us in the short term. But it's not actually about a cost, which I'll come back to later. Taking action on climate isn't a cost, it's an investment in our future, which is what most of the world's largest corporations now understand. And the enabling elements of our economy and our societies that support our corporations and our economies, like capital, debt or lending, and insurance. All of these sectors and many governments around the world are getting on with climate action, even while some governments aren't necessarily providing the greatest leadership. But the reason why corporations and leaders in our communities in all sectors are getting on with reversing global warming is because we've solved it. We know what to do to take climate action. We know how to reverse global warming because we've found an answer to, an explanation for, and a means of effectively dealing with the problem. Today, I'm going to share Project Drawdown, which is the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, which details for the world how we can reach net zero emissions by 2050 worldwide. And for those of you familiar with from the book from 2017, there's now a 2020 update available to download for free, which shows that we can reach net zero emissions worldwide by the 2040s. I'm also going to talk about the incredible, unprecedented economic opportunity for Australia to be an economic superpower of the future low-carbon age, and how projects like the Million Jobs Plan, launched in Melbourne just a few weeks ago by Beyond Zero Emissions, shows the incredible growth and employment potential of investing in a low-carbon economy as a pathway out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We can rebuild Australia's economy with 1.8 million new jobs in just 5 years of investment in renewables and low emissions projects. Jobs around the country, particularly in the regions and communities that need them most. And of course, I'm going to talk about the fact that you're incredibly fortunate to be part of an industry that has a pivotal role in global climate action. More on that later. But for now, back to the fact that society is moving on. As Caroline said, it was a profound summer in Australia where it seemed to switch the awareness around climate threats. But actually, before our summer, there were some extraordinary changes in the global landscape of climate action, as I realised I just forgot to turn off my telephone. So what we're finding is that in 2019, there have been some extraordinary shifts. We've all heard the term that if you want to really know what's happening in the world, follow the money. So let me start off by pointing out some extraordinary shifts that we're seeing in the world today around major corporations, the capital that invests in them, the debt or the lending that adds to their finance, and the insurance that supports and mitigates their risk, enables them to function. There's an extraordinary amount of developments over the last 12 months, just in the last 6 months, just in the last 6 days, which I don't have time to share all of it for you today. But I want to just point out a few key highlights, like, for example, how the world's largest money manager is overhauling its strategy because of climate change. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has said that a fundamental reshaping of finance is underway as issues like climate change become a defining factor in companies' long-term prospects. So that's the world's largest money manager with $7 trillion US of assets under management, saying there's a fundamental reshaping of finance. That's backed up, for example, by an alliance that was announced last year of the 27 institutional investors around the world with $5 trillion in assets under management. You can see here some of the largest insurers in the world, some of the world's biggest investors coming together in an alliance to reach net zero emissions by 2050. So that's a hint at how money is shifting, but you can actually see the evidence. And where do you see the evidence? Well, you see the evidence of the future in the stock market. Why are stock markets so high now, even though we still have the economic problem of the COVID-19 pandemic? Because they're looking to the future beyond the pandemic. Well, if we look at this article here from February, shows that big investors, big endowments have been spurning fossil fuel stocks because of a very easy decision. Because for the last 10 years, following the GFC, the S&P market energy sector has gained just 1%, while the broader market has gained 212%. Just to back that up, here's actually the key thing about that is many of you would recognise Jim Cramer from Squawk Box and CNBC, and here's his quote from January 31. "I'm done with fossil fuels. They're just done." You're seeing divestiture from a lot of different funds. We're in the death knell phase. So you can see the writing on the wall, and it's evidenced in a report released just a few weeks ago here in Australia showing how fossil fuel stocks have underperformed for a decade. Here you see in red pure play fossil fuels plotted against the ASX 300 broader market for the last 10 years. We see that after the pandemic crash, down 47% fossil fuel stocks, but before that crash and still now afterwards, there's a 68% gap between the broader market's performance for 10 years and fossil fuel stocks. So the decline is underway. This is one of the hints that shows us that money has shifted. And it's not just about capital. When we look at debt or lending, the world's largest banks, Australia's largest banks, have made an announcement or have internal documents that have been leaked that show that they are no longer willing to support new projects, particularly in coal. We're seeing the same thing from some of the world's biggest insurers, declaring that they will not provide insurance to new coal projects and other fossil fuel investments. So what we're seeing is a shift of the money. And money talks and money shows us what's really happening. And so now, in the last 12 months, that actually corporations and capital markets have probably made the biggest difference of the shift to climate action around the world. Having said that, though, let's talk about governments. Here in Australia, every state and territory has declared a net zero emissions target of 2050. Every state and territory. In New Zealand, the same. So there's leadership across sectors. Everyone is on this bandwagon, except there's maybe one government in Australia that maybe hasn't quite got on the train yet of net zero emissions by 2050. It'd be nice to speculate why that might be the case, and I don't have time, but I reckon you can probably guess for yourself why that's happening. But why is everyone moving on and getting on? Well, they're getting on with it because we've got the solutions. Drawdown project was released in 2017, initiated by Paul Hawken and Amanda Cavill. And they created a project with almost 100 scientists and engineers and economists to model and measure the impact that the 100 most substantive solutions could have to stop and reverse global warming. As I've said, there's an update to this project which you can download for free from the drawdown.org website, which shows we could actually get to net zero emissions sooner. So what I want to do today is share some of those solutions with you. In the update, there's 82 climate solutions across sectors. And it begins with the sources of our emissions. So across the world today, electricity generation is 24% of our emissions up into the atmosphere. Food, agriculture and land use, 24%. Industry, 21%. Transportation, 14%. Buildings, 6%, and other energy uses accounting for 10%. They are all the emissions up into our atmosphere. Then there are the sinks. That is how we absorb or draw down carbon emissions. And of course, it begins with land sinks, forests, greenery, earth, which accounts for 24% of our emissions. And then there's coastal and ocean sinks accounting for 17%. Now, you can see the shortfall there. What we've got is 59% of the emissions remain in the atmosphere. And that's our problem, because that's what's heating up the planet. So what the project Drawdown does is it looks at what are the solutions on the sources side to reduce the emissions we're putting up into the atmosphere, and what are the solutions to increase the amount of emissions we're drawing down. Land sinks, coastal and ocean sinks, and of course artificial capture of carbon from the atmosphere, like carbon capture and sequestration, or turning carbons into other uses. Now, I'm not going to take you through all 82 solutions this morning, although I urge you to take a closer look at them. I'll just show you some highlights. And it won't surprise you that number one solution is renewable energy. We find that the number one of all is onshore wind, which has the potential to not only be an incredible opportunity, but for improving the planet's environment, but actually represents a potential of $3.9 to $10 trillion of savings by using wind power rather than fossil fuels. Now, then there's offshore wind, which is more expensive, limited opportunity. It comes in as the 33rd opportunity worldwide, still coming in with a potential of $800 billion of net savings versus if we kept going the way we are with fossil fuels. It won't surprise you that utility-scale solar comes in as the second biggest solution, and it's modelled for projections of $12 to $26 trillion in savings for our world economy if we were using this instead of fossil fuels. Solar on our rooftops, of course, a solution that all of us can be part of. Hopefully we can put them on our homes and other buildings. Comes in as the 8th biggest solution worldwide, and again represents not a cost, a saving of about $8 to $13 trillion for the people who can take advantage of it. So these, not surprising to see these as some of the top solutions, but it's not surprising to see that things like forest protection, coastal wetland protection, and things like tree plantations on degraded land are all promising solutions. Some of them, again, incredibly profitable. So forestry with tree plantations, $2.1 to $3.4 trillion of potential economic profit. But it's interesting to look at a whole spectrum of solutions. Technology solutions like high-speed rail, improving our options with public transport. Telepresence. Well, we've all come to know how incredibly flexible and advantageous telepresence can be as we're using it right now, which again represents an opportunity for $1 to $4 trillion in savings for organisations around the world taking advantage of it instead of travel. For this audience today, you'd be delighted to hear that smart thermostats, of course, are a key solution, roughly in about the middle of the list of 82. Smart thermostats representing an opportunity that's projected that probably about 60% of internet-connected homes could have smart thermostats by 2050. And if they did, there's about $1.8 to $2.1 trillion in energy savings for the people who use them. But then there's some really surprising results in the top 10. How about the fact that the third biggest solution worldwide is reduced food waste? If we can divert food from being wasted in supply chains, so in developing countries, the problem of waste is that we don't get it from the farm to market quickly enough. But in developed nations like ours, the problem is we throw too much food away. And when we throw it away, it goes to landfill and emits methane, which is incredibly more potent than CO2. So reduced food waste is a solution that every single one of us on the planet can be part of every day in our lives, in our homes, by composting or putting our food waste into the green garbage bin, which is increasingly becoming the option with local councils. Another surprise is plant-rich diets comes in number 4 globally. Again, something we can all be part of day in, day out. No, I'm not telling you to become a vegan, and I'm not here to talk about the V word. What I'm talking about is that we can all adjust our consumption. We could perhaps consume less beef and lamb, consume less dairy, which has a profound environmental impact. Then there's other solutions that really surprise, like health and education, that in fact keeping girls, particularly in high school, keeping them in school for longer can have a profound impact. Aside from the social, the health, the personal empowerment benefits of keeping girls in school rather than them being sold into sex slavery or into marriage or to working on in jobs and roles that they're not keen on doing and pursuing, giving them more empowerment, more independence and more control, for example, over their own family planning and their own reproductive rights, that has the potential to have an incredibly profound impact on climate change, as well as all those other fabulous benefits. But here's interesting, that number 9 solution worldwide is refrigerant management. Because, of course, fluorinated gases have a potent greenhouse effect. And the key challenge here is that managing the leaks and disposals of the refrigerant gases that can be emissions from buildings, from vehicles and from landfill. Substantial reductions could be achieved through preventing leakage, but actually 90% of it is about the disposal and destruction of the gases at end of life. Now, although there's some revenue that you could generate from repurposing or recovering refrigerant gases, the actual cost to establish the networks and systems of recovery and destruction and leak avoidance mean that the numbers you see on the bottom there shows there's actually a net cost to the world in the order of about $600 billion over the next 30 years. But refrigerants management is something we have to address as we make the transition to the number 10 solution worldwide, alternative refrigerants. So, of course, fluorinated gases aren't the only refrigerants available. And, you know, they're incredibly potent, 1,000 to 9,000 times more potent than CO2. But, of course, alternatives such as ammonia, captured carbon dioxide, propane. I mean, everyone on this call probably knows more about the opportunities in this area than I do, and it'll be talked about a lot further today. But pursuant to the Kigali Accord signed in 2016, the opportunity here to replace HFC refrigerants with a mix of alternatives represents the opportunity to prevent 43 to 50 gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions over the next 30 years. And it's projected that we could probably replace 70 to 80% of HFC refrigerants by 2050. Now, of course, there's plenty of other developments that might arise out of fabulous initiatives like the Global Cooling Prize. The key is, of course, that cooling's got a profound role to play in our near future. As the world gets hotter, everyone's going to want to keep cooler. So you're incredibly fortunate that day in, day out in your working careers, you're part of the solution, that you can be having a profound impact on reversing climate change in Australia. Now, next up, well, I've finished there on the solutions from the project Drawdown, but I'll put up this top 26. I've covered most of the top 10, but just take a moment to have a look at the second column on the right and look at the solutions from 11 to 26 while I pause and take a drink. I'll also ask my 11-year-old son in the corner to stop making the noise in the background with the kitchen tap running, so I apologise if that's really noisy for you out there. They are the joys of remote schooling at home. So, amazing spectrum of solutions. I haven't got time to go through the 82 modelled solutions and some of the future attractions, but I urge you to get hold of the book or download the free report. Have a look at these 82 solutions. I guarantee you will find a handful of solutions that inspire and excite you. Not things that you can't necessarily be part of, like a massive wind farm, but things that you can be part of day in, day out, or that you can be part of in your working career, your industry, your organisation, broader areas of your life. I will quickly, though, just show you that there's some interesting possibilities coming around the corner, or called coming attractions, like marine permaculture. Seaweed, one of the fastest growing plants on the planet, represents an extraordinary opportunity for us to capture and draw carbon out of the atmosphere into thriving, lively oceans. Then there's things like building with wood, eliminating almost completely the use of cement or steel in construction of towers. Here's a 10-storey tower in Brisbane, an 18-storey tower in Norway, and a 25-storey building in China. Extraordinary opportunities to use plantation timber rather than the heavily energy-intensive and emitting cement and steel. And then there's things like a cow walking onto a beach to eat its lunch. A discovery here in Australia that if we feed cows a combination of seaweed with a certain red algae, we can actually reduce their methane emissions by up to 98%. So there's a lot of extraordinary potential because there's amazing things being done around the world. So many people have thrown themselves at the climate and ecological crises and working on solutions to address them. Drawdown represents just one project that brings it all together. And what's extraordinary about the outcome of the latest modelling from Drawdown is it identifies and projects what's the cost of this, what's it going to take. The upfront cost for nations to reach net zero is estimated to be somewhere in the order of $25 trillion over the next 30 years. However, it's not a cost, it's an incredibly fantastic investment because the projections and modelling shows that the net savings and profits over the lifetime of these solutions is 4 or 5 times greater at about $100 to $140 trillion of net savings and profits for our global economy. And that opportunity, that incredible economic opportunity, is why I highlight this profound work from Ross Garnaut, possibly the greatest economic prophet in Australia. Released this book in October last year, where it talks about not only can Australia have 100% renewable energy, how about 200%, 400%, 700% renewable energy? We've already got 100% renewable energy for ACT. Tasmania is about to achieve a permanent 100% renewable energy. But what happens when you go beyond 100%? What happens when you go to 200% or more? Well, what happens is you can find an incredible economic opportunity. Australia has more renewable energy resource than any other developed nation in the world. What that means is going to 200% renewables or 400 or 700% and exporting renewable energy through massive pipelines to Asia or through green hydrogen and ammonia, there's an opportunity to create for Australia the world's cheapest electricity. And if you've got the world's cheapest electricity, that means you can manufacture the world's cheapest steel, world's cheapest aluminium, and a huge array of other incredible manufacturing opportunities. So Australia is in a unique position. And it's not about saying to coal miners and people in the gas industry and other fossil fuels that, hey, sorry, your jobs don't exist anymore, but that's okay, you can become a tourism guide. Well, that probably doesn't appeal to your average coal miner, but that's not the solution. We can transition people out of coal and gas and other fossil fuels in Australia into other opportunities in similar industries because there's an incredibly massive mining opportunity for Australia in a low carbon future. Incredible resources of lithium required for most batteries. Then there's copper, there's rare earths, there's an amazing spectrum of opportunities. I wish I had more time to go through them for you today. But the key is that Australia, which has been the lucky country multiple times over, Melbourne, the wealthiest city in the world in the 1880s. Then there's the wheat and the wool and the various other incredible natural advantages Australia's enjoyed to be the lucky country. But now Australia is the lucky country once again, with an incredible endowment of renewable energy. And that economic opportunity lays at the heart of a renewables-led recovery out of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is brilliantly articulated by a number of projects, including Beyond Zero Emissions Million Jobs Plan, which shows the employment potential for investing in a low-carbon economy. As I said, 1.8 million new job years can be generated in the next 5 years. It's about affordable, reliable, clean energy. Actually, not affordable, profitable, reliable, clean energy and exporting it to the world. It's about reducing cost of living for all Australians, and it's about strengthening regional communities. There's 200,000 jobs in renewable energy and transmission, potentially 940,000 job years in retrofitting buildings for energy efficiency and improved performance, and developing new social housing. 140,000 jobs in building electric buses and other green transport solutions. 230,000 new jobs potential in clean manufacturing, clean cement, clean steel, clean aluminium, green hydrogen, ammonia. Then there's 200,000 jobs in regenerating our land, and maybe 80,000 jobs in moving towards a circular economy with recycling 90% of our waste. Going into the detail in an area that's probably more relevant for you today is this opportunity to retrofit 2.5 million low-income households with improved low-energy solutions, which of course involves a spectrum from HVAC and R, and building social dwellings to get people off the streets and out of disadvantage across Australia. Incredible opportunities. I urge you to take a closer look at the Million Jobs Plan and the growing momentum for a renewables-led recovery in Australia. Because for every $10 million invested in energy, in fossil fuels, you get 27 jobs, but in renewables and energy efficiency, it's 3 times more at around about 75. And that's why business unions and green groups in May started calling on the government for a COVID-19 recovery that's led by a clean energy transition. And in fact, another report that came out in June showing that a renewable energy stimulus can create 3 times as many Australian jobs as fossil fuel stimulus. So it's an incredible economic opportunity for Australia, and the time is here. And to close out, before I take some questions, remember that the first myth about climate is that it's about saving the environment. No, it's not. It's about saving humanity and the quality of our lives. But there's a second myth, which is that 100% renewables won't work and will cost more. That's old. That's already been debunked. That's gone, because renewables can supply 100% of our energy, backed up by hydropower and batteries, and it can do so cheaper than new fossil fuel power solutions. Another myth is that coal and gas are key to Australia's economy. Well, actually, they're each about 1 to 2% of our economy. So if we transition out of those industries, there's far more economic potential, way more jobs in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and all of the other areas of climate action solutions. The next one is climate action will make Australia uncompetitive. We couldn't possibly take action before everyone else and get ahead of the curve. Well, that's ridiculous, because in fact, if we take climate action and we move as quickly as possible to exporting renewable energy, not only is it the opposite, we wouldn't be just competitive, we'd have a competitive advantage over the rest of the world, because we'd end up with cheaper power sooner than most other nations. Which leads me to the most important myth of all, which is the notion that climate action is a cost to our economy. Climate action isn't a cost. It is an investment in our economic future. If an energy minister in Australia was talking about investing in a new coal power station, you can bet he wouldn't call it a cost to the economy. He'd call it an investment in our economic future. Well, climate action is, as I've shown you, highlighted today, it's 4 or 5 times return. The investment versus the savings and the profit that can be generated. There's a cavalcade of other evidence from sources like central banks around the world who've said we're better off taking climate action than not, purely on a financial economic basis. And so with that, I say, when you're out there talking to people about climate change, help them understand that it's not a cost. It's not about what we're going to lose or what we're going to miss out on. It's about what we're going to gain. It's about making a better world. And with that, we'll take some questions now, which I gather, Caroline, you'll lead us through.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you so much, Jean. What a fabulous presentation. So very engaging. Thank you. So yes, we've got a few minutes because we have to keep on, the program. But there is a question. So let me have a look now. Okay. I'm going to push the question to the slides. Yes. Okay. Okay,
Right, so people
the
can submit their
question
questions.
from Atelier 10, and the question is, how is mining a sustainable endeavor? Shouldn't we be focusing on resource recovery in the supply chain, circular economy, rather than destroying more ecosystem with minings? What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, indeed. We can't mine. Yeah, we can't mine forever. And, the broader ecological crisis is about the fact that, the Club of Rome in the 1970s predicted that humanity will run out of resources somewhere mid this century. And we're on track for that. So you're absolutely right to highlight. Mining is going to continue to have its place. But the thing is, you don't have to mine resources out of the ground. If you talk to Rio Tinto's most senior executives, they'll tell you that they attend circular economy conferences around the world because they understand that there's much better potential to mine resources from our waste. That actually it's potentially cheaper and more profitable to mine metals and some minerals and from our waste instead of continuing to dig it from out of the ground. So yes, the ultimate bigger picture for our climate and broader ecological crises is moving to a circular economy, and that we actually need to recover our resources from the waste stream. So get away from the linear model of take it out of the ground, make something, use it up, throw it away. We need to make that a circular model, a circular economy where we reuse resources just like the natural ecosystems do that. One animal or species waste is the source of energy and sustenance for another species in our ecosystems. We have to take that same circular model in our modern economy. Next question.
Okay, there is a question from Jeff Robertson. So let me again.
And Caroline, while you're looking that up and getting that to push through, I'm showing about 5 minutes left of the 40 minutes for question time. Is that accurate? How many minutes
this is the last question that we will be able to take today. So the question is from Jeff Robinson. What role does improving building standards in Australia have in reducing carbon emissions while improving the resilience of those most vulnerable in our society?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Great question. It's an incredible opportunity. So Australia, we actually have very poor energy efficiency in buildings, particularly compared to Europe, where they have a far more thorough approach. So there's an incredible opportunity in the built environment, in our homes and our workplaces and in manufacturing. There's great work and leadership in this sector in Australia, wonderful initiatives, but the key is that governments could be doing a lot more. Our state governments are getting on and moving forward with it, but there's an opportunity for the federal government to support and drive a lot more of this. What we need is our federal government to commit to a net zero emissions target by 2050 to enable a freer flow of capital and investment. And so I'll finish off there, if that's the last question, of just highlighting that there's one last thing to say about these myths. Climate action isn't a cost to our economy. It's an investment in a more prosperous economic future, but better well-being for humanity. And the other thing is that it's not about sacrifice. The future isn't about sacrifice and what we're going to have to do without or lose. We can create a better future for the world, a more thriving economy where we have the opportunity for more equality and more people to enjoy a greater livelihood. So climate action is something to embrace now and get on board, and it's going to be an incredibly profitable opportunity for Australia's economy. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today and for your attention. Please do email me or connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to continue the conversation. But for now, I'll hand it over to you. You'll hear more about the built environment later today with the program that Caroline and the Sheco team have put together. Thanks very much, and I'll hand it back over to you, Caroline, to move forward.
Again, Jean, thank you so much, for joining us, today and taking the time to speak at the conference.